One. Hi, everyone. Joette Calabrese here. It's our Monday night Facebook Live, and I am going to talk to you tonight about, I'll wait till you start coming in because I can see that there are names just starting to get moving along and get this. Here we go. Hi, Marla. Nice to see you there. Nice to see, I see a couple people here I know. Oh, it's great. It's great. Nice to see you all. Hi, Shannon. Shannon's my right arm. My work. She runs the office. She runs everything. She runs everything for me. It's great. Oh, there's Natalie. Oh, hi, Natalie. Nice to see you. Oh, it's great. Love it. Hi, Christy. It's so much fun. You know, I don't normally read the names because I'm so, I'm just still getting used to doing this live. And so it takes more effort for me to concentrate on what I'm supposed to be doing and saying. And then I see myself, so I'm always, fixing and fussing and saying, geez, look, see what I just did? I'm always fussing and trying to make myself look decent. It's a strange thing to watch yourself in action. So tonight, I'm in Florida, and it's very warm, very nice, very comfortable, and I've got these gorgeous flowers up here. Actually, I should point this way. They're lilies that my husband brought home yesterday, and they're blossoming, and the whole room is so fragrant. It's so nice. It makes me feel as though I'm in Florida even when I'm inside. So I want to say welcome to everyone. Oh, hi, Nancy. Nice to see you. I see a couple of other people. And so tonight we're going to talk about provings. And the reason that I think it's appropriate is because there are a lot of questions about that. And I think there are a lot of fears about provings. First, I want to talk a little bit about whether or not homeopathy is safe. And that can kind of give us our underpinnings for understanding this. Now, remember, homeopathy is medicine, but it is called relatively safe. So we don't see side effects. As in modern medicine, we see side effects when the medicine is working. We see side effects when the medicine is not working. In homeopathy, we see provings or an aggravation if something's gone awry. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. What can go and how it can go awry. So let me give you a story that might help put this in perspective for you a little bit better. Many years ago, when I was 29 years old, I had my wisdom teeth extracted under poor advice. There was nothing wrong with my teeth. I didn't even know that they were there. I had no experience with them at all. But I was using preventative medicine. That's what it was called in those days. I was going to be on the ball and make sure that I was not going to have trouble someday. So I very foolishly had all 4 teeth extracted. 2 of them became infected. The 2 lower wisdom teeth became infected. And I took antibiotics at that time. This was back in 1979, so you can figure out how old I was then. And I thought that was the end of it. I didn't really feel anything after that. So I thought, well, we're done with that and on with life. Little did I know, though, that both those 2 teeth remained infected for 30-some years. And it wasn't until the next tooth over got in, that was number 31. This was number 32. This is 31. The next tooth cracked and got an infection. And I went to a dentist, a holistic dentist, and he said, oh, you've got an abscess there, and we really have to get rid of the tooth that has no integrity. The crack is down into the root, so it was extracted. So still at that time not realizing, now he had took x-rays and he did not see that number 32 was also infected. So a few years went by and number 31 started to give me trouble. I could feel pain, and I knew that the infection, the abscess that he said was there, was still there. So I went to a biological dentist, and that is, I won't go into that too deeply. I talked about it in my course, Alternative to Antibiotics, and if you've taken that course, you know what I'm talking about. And you'll also, if you're interested, it's not, I'm not selling that course right now. It's kind of put aside on a shelf, but if you're interested, should you be interested, you may certainly call my office for that course, because I go into this a little more detail. But because of these infections, now I had 3, because I went to a biological dentist to find out what was going on, and she said, oh my dear, you have not only this one, number 31, but number 32 and number 17 infected. And we have to get those out right away, and we have to debride. So I'm a chicken. I'll be honest, I'm a chicken. And so I decided not to have the debridement, because the debridement was opening up the area and cleaning out, and it makes it sound not too bad. But now remember, this was bone. And this was bone that was infected for over 3 decades. So you can imagine the damage, the necrosis, the level of infection that would have been discovered. So around that time, I went to India, and I watched the Banerjees and the other doctors at the Homeopathic Research Foundation treat bone infections pretty readily. In fact, it was pretty common, especially in children, for the tibia bone. And I watched them cure, not overnight, it's not overnight, not for something that deep and that old, but I saw a case that would come in which it was the 2nd or 3rd time that the person or the child had the meeting with the doctors, and I knew the protocols they were being given, and I was watching these infections abate with no antibiotics, no debridement, no ozone treatment, just homeopathy. So I started on my own journey of using these medicines. It was Hypericum 200, Arsenicum 200, twice daily, and I was using Symphytum 200 and Calcifas 3 daily. Both medicines, which both of them are actually a combination of 2. So if you were to add them all up, there were actually 4 medicines. I took twice daily every day for a few years. And I've kind of lost track as to how long it was, but it seems to me, and I do have my notes, and one of these days I'm going to present this thoroughly with showing my x-rays before, x-rays during again, further x-rays, the sonograms, etc. So that and from 2 different dentists, one in Ohio and one in Pennsylvania. So we have a full array of understanding of it. Now, I took these medicines every day, as I said, for a few years. After about 3 years, I started to become very anxious. And I had suffered from anxiety many years ago, and I actually think it was a relationship to these infections that I had, because I did have symptoms from these infections from time to time. Mostly it was fatigue, my allergies worsened, there were a couple of things, I won't go into all the details, because I really want to stick to the point of approving. And my dentists are not local. I had to travel. The one that I ended up choosing that I liked best was in Ohio, which is 5 hours away from where I lived. And so it would mean I would have to take an entire day off from work. And my husband would always go with me. We used that time to talk, etc. But it was take a lot of time. So I didn't go very often, but I continued the medicines. And I noticed that because of this anxiety, I was beginning to think that the infections, especially the right side, number 32, were worsening. I was thinking, well, maybe I'm using the wrong medicines. Could I be using the wrong medicines? But I also considered the very strong possibility that I might be proving these medicines because I no longer needed them. Did you hear what I said? I no longer needed them. That's where proving comes from. So actually it was my husband who said, maybe you're proving this, and it made perfect sense. And I have written about this before, that when I'm not well, my brain turns to mush. And so that's what it was, mush. And so I said, you know what, I think you're right. I think I am proving it. So those of you who've been studying homeopathy with me know that one of the best ways to stop the action of a medicine/medicines is to use Camphor 200, 1 dose, 1 day. So I did. And within about half a day, all the anxiety, now I had been suffering from this anxiety for a couple of weeks now. All the anxiety melted away and I was back to myself. My energy was returned. I was sleeping well, etc., etc. So it was indeed approving. And the reason I know that is because shortly after I went to the dentist and I went for x-rays, and indeed the infections were gone. Now, you would think that would be the end of the story, but later on, about a year later, I started to feel some sensations in those areas again, and I went back to the dentist, and indeed the infection had kind of started up a little bit again in only one area. Remember, I had three. Actually, it was like this: 2 on this side and 1 on this side, and there was only 1 remaining. So I started up the medicines again because it was appropriate to do so. By doing that, the sensations I was experiencing in my jaw and into my ear, down into my neck, even across my clavicle, started to abate. And at a certain point, I noticed, I have this all written down, but I did not bring my notes with me to prepare for this discussion tonight. But as I recall, it was about another year, and I stopped, maybe it was 8 months, maybe shorter than that, and I stopped taking the medicines because the same thing happened again. I started to get anxiety out of the blue for no reason. And I believe it was the Hypericum arsenicum that was doing it, because arsenicum is to help anxiety. Hence, when we use it inappropriately, it will cause anxiety. So what did I do? You tell me, what did I do? It's instead of freaking, I simply took Camphor 200, 1 dose, 1 day. I also inhaled mint because essential oil of mint will often antidote. And what I mean by inhaling, I didn't put it in a distiller or a diffuser, excuse me, far away. On the other side of the room, I opened the bottle and sniffed it into my nostrils, both sides, and that helped bring down the anxiety and eliminate the action of the Hypericum and arsenicum. That was approving. So when people tell me they're very worried about provings, I don't know, it's a small price to pay. To have these teeth debrided was each area was going to be $6,000. I was about to pay $18,000 if I had decided to go for the surgical procedure. I would have had antibiotics, most likely. I would have been quite in pain. Of course, I would have had my remedies that would have helped a good deal. But if I did this in a traditional fashion, I would have been out of commission for quite some time. And there's no indication that it's going to be 100%. In fact, many times when this is done, these debridements in the mandible, that you have to go back and do it again. Not unlike what happened to me, it came back again because it wasn't completely finished. And so I had to use the medicines again. So do provings frighten me? You bet they don't. I just cured something that I had for 30 years, osteomyelitis, folks. Osteomyelitis, bone infections, very serious stuff. They're gone. Now I'll be checking again. I certainly am not going to stop going for an x-ray from time to time, getting a sonogram from time to time, and making sure I'll use sonograms more frequently than I certainly would use x-rays. But if the sonogram is inconclusive, then I might go for an x-ray to make certain that it is indeed completed. So here's how you follow so that you don't cause a proving. There are 3 rules. The first rule is that the diagnosis must be correct. Now, if I had guessed at this and not known that it was a bone infection and instead thought, oh, it must just be an abscess because that's what that last dentist found, and I would have taken Heparcel, for example. Heparcel 6 is what we use for soft tissue infections around the teeth, in the gums and around the root. I would have not had very good results at all because that's not at all what I had. So your diagnosis has to be correct. And I argue that many times I hear of times when people have provings because they don't have the diagnosis correct. They're making an assumption. Well, I must have yeast. Why must I have yeast? Well, because I crave sugar. Hence, I will take the remedies for yeast, and then they start proving the medicine. You see where I'm going with this? That's why it's important to get a diagnosis. Now, does it mean that it must be a diagnosis from a doctor? Not a bad idea, particularly if it's something that is chronic. But if you've had an ear infection and you've treated with antibiotics, then you've had another antibiotics and another and another and another, after a while, you can discern what that is. You know that that is otitis media. So, of course, you don't need to go to see the doctor each and every time. But if you don't know what you're treating and you use medicines accordingly, I practically guarantee that you will have a proving. The second rule that you must follow is the protocol must be correct. If you read the book wrong, if you read the notes and the courses I give you incorrectly and use the wrong protocol, or you say, oh, I don't need arsenicum 200 with hypericum. I only have arsenicum 30. I think I'll just use arsenicum 30. What do you think is going to happen? You're not following the recipe. If you follow the protocols, you will see results. What are the protocols? You must have the diagnosis and it must be correct. Number two, the protocol must be correct. In other words, the remedies that you're choosing must be exactly as they're taught. And number three, you have to know when to stop. When you see enough improvement, see, I didn't stop in time. I should have gone for another sonogram or an x-ray to find out what was going on. So I didn't do that. So I proved it. Now, would I be going for those sonograms and those diagnostic tests regularly? No, I don't have that kind of time. I wasn't that sickly, especially after having taken the medicines for this amount of time, the homeopathics. It's not necessary. So I took a chance. But I took the chance knowing that there was a potential that I could end up proving. So this is why I tell you, use the protocols. These are recipes. If you break from the recipe because you're using a different potency, or you're using it more frequently, or you're using it without the correct diagnosis, or you don't know when to stop, of course you're going to have a proving. So these are heirloom recipes. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm teaching you protocols. Most of these protocols are from the Banerjees. They have shown again and again and again over 150 years. I'm looking at here. Some people claim to prove for days, weeks after stopping a remedy. Is that possible? Certainly, but if you take camphor and you sniff mint, it's very likely that it will stop. Now, is it possible that it could go on and on and on? I suppose it's possible, but in my 30-some years of using homeopathy, not for myself only, but students, clients, I've never seen that happen. So if you're one of them, let me know, because I'm happy to help. But I've never seen that happen. And a lot of times, people misinterpret what they're reading. They think, or what they're seeing, reading in their symptoms. A lot of times people say, but I got worse after. Well, maybe it's because that's the progression of the disease. I mean, diseases do have a progression. So is it the progression of the disease, or is it the homeopathic medicine? So it's important that you know how to read what you are observing and interpret it properly. Let's look at another question. I thought it was Symphytum 200 plus Calc-Phos 3. Oh, did I say, please, excuse me. If I said Calc-Phos 200, please excuse me. It's Hypericum 200 and Arsenicum 200. Symphytum 200 with Calc-Phos 3. So if I said that incorrectly, please cross that off. Can someone prove a Banerjee protocol? Hello, I just described. Yes, that's just what I said. These were Banerjee protocols. You bet they were proven, because I didn't stop at the right time. I was done. Yes, any medicine can prove if you don't follow the 3 rules. Maybe that question came in before you heard my 3 rules, but understand the rules. You have to have the correct diagnosis. The protocol must be correct and followed with the potencies correct, etc. And you must know when to stop. You have to know how to read this. So usually what people talk about improving is it's fear of, oh no, I'm getting worse. Well, why are you getting worse? Don't just automatically assume it must be that because you've used the method of twice a day that must do it. I had to have that medicine twice a day. How do you get rid of osteomyelitis with 1 dose every 8 weeks? I'm sorry. I just don't see how that could work. And I know that it worked the other way. So, I mean, is it possible? I suppose it is possible. But when you're in a fix and there is a specific protocol with specific potencies, frequencies, and timing, I would urge you to stick with it. If you don't have the confidence to do that, then don't. And don't blame the method when it's probably inexperience. That's what I'm really saying. Okay, could you explain the difference between an aggravation and a proving? Certainly. We don't see very many aggravations with this method because an aggravation I learned long ago, long before I even knew the Banerjees. I learned long ago from Dr. Ramakrishnan that if you don't want to see an aggravation, give the medicine a second time, second day, and third day, and fourth day. Interesting, isn't it? It's he's still using somewhat classical, but he's saying to repeat it 4 times or 3 times. Because just when an aggravation is about to ensue, someone's about to get worse before they get better, if you use the medicine, it settles it down. And just when it's about to come up again, you take the medicine and again, it settles it down. So an aggravation is meaning that you're getting better, you're getting worse before you get better. Approving means that you're using something incorrectly. You're doing something wrong. And there are enough variables that it's likely you that's causing the proving, not the method. Now, I make those mistakes, not just for myself, but I make mistakes in using a medicine too long because I don't get to observe correctly. I don't get to observe soon enough, or I may even have chosen incorrectly. That certainly can happen, but it doesn't happen that often. And when it does, we use Camphor 200, 1 dose 1 day, everything else is stopped. If the person is still suffering after that, I say perhaps a second dose of Camphor 200 the following day, and sniff mint. Hold it up to the nostrils, essential oil of mint. Do we have more questions there, Perry? Perry, do we have more questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, good. So let's see if I can find some more questions. It might be the last 2. Okay, how can you tell if one is proving versus the healing process, but you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step backward? That is not improving. When you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, it means you're improving. Remember, you're moving forward. It's a net gain of 1 step. That's not approving. Approving means you're going all the way back, or you're showing, basically, it's not that you're actually going back to the essential, the original, but what you're really doing is going back to what that medicine was intended to correct. So arsenicum, for me, caused anxiety. That's exactly, if you open up your Materia Medica and read Arsenicum album, it will tell you Arsenicum album is for anxiety. They're a very anxious person who needs it. And that's exactly what it was causing in me. And restlessness, it was causing that in me. And insomnia, that's exactly what it was causing in me. So the medicine was coming back and biting because I did not need it. I did not need it. So the last one, right? The last one. Thanks, Joette. I just read people saying they prove for days after sniffing mint and doing camphor. They claim remedies stay in the system for long periods based on back of Materia Medica after, oh, I see, okay, after stopping the remedies. Thanks for answering because I thought it was unlikely. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Okay. In the back of Kent's repertory, and it may also be in other books now, more recent books, but in the back of Kent's repertory, not the Indian version, it's got to be the British version, there is I don't have my tent at hand right now. I think it's in the other room. And it tells you how long a medicine acts, but not if you antidote it. It tells you how long a medicine will act in and of itself, and usually it says more often than not, it says 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, etc. So that's what it's telling you. Perry, may I see that question again so that I can make sure that I'm answering it fully? There was another part of it. Oh, people say that the provings stay on days after. Do we know that those are provings? Are we sure they're provings? And because as I said a few minutes ago, a lot of times it's the progression of the illness. I would have to know a little bit more about it to be able to comment on it. But if a proving is lasting more than a few days, it means you just keep sniffing mint. I mean, I suppose it's possible. But I've not seen it last for more than, say, a week or so. I'm not going to tell you it's going to go like that. Because for me, when I took that arsenic hyper-Rs, Hypericum 200, arsenicum 200, I felt a change within half a day, even in just a few hours. But I still was not myself over a period of many days. So during that time, I put mint in my coffee, and I sniffed mint, and I used it again and again until I came back to myself. So, okay, but why do I always hear don't diagnose until only let symptoms guide? Because you're listening to classical homeopathy. And you must diagnose. How can you know what you've got if you don't have a diagnostic? You're using the symptoms for that diagnosis, but how do you know that that sore in your side is a muscle that's been pulled, or it's your appendix? You better get a diagnosis. You better get to a hospital and find out, or a gastroenterologist. Absolutely, you need to have diagnostics. Not for everything. If you're scratching and you used to have eczema and you look at it and you say, look at that, eczema. I mean, let's be logical here. You know it's eczema. But if you've got a pain in your abdomen and you don't know what it is, or you've got a lump on your breast, you might want to have that checked out. Yeah, you need a diagnosis. Plus, the way that I teach homeopathy is these are based on diagnostics. It's a little different than classical. Classical does use diagnosis from time to time, and many of them do use it all the time. But if you're only using symptoms, you're going to go down rabbit holes. You've got to use the diagnosis and the symptoms. Oh, it's an ear infection. Okay, got it. I guess I thought it was a headache. You know, so you have to know what this is. You have to be able to decipher. Oh, this is an infection of the sinuses. Oh, I thought it was allergies. Those are two different protocols. You need to know this. How are we doing on questions, Barry? Do we have any more questions? Yep, we have. Okay. Great. I'll take a little drink of my tea. All righty. So, wouldn't the essential oil of mint interfere with the homeopathic remedy? You bet. That's exactly what we're talking about. Maybe you came in late. Yes, it does interfere. It stops the action, and that's exactly what we're talking about for approving. We want to stop the action. So I don't know if we have any other questions. What I want to tell you is that put results above doctrine. I'm going to remind you again that I teach the Banerjee protocols. And if you're really interested in homeopathy, you might want to buy their book called The Banerjee Protocols. Take my courses in which I expound on all those protocols in that book, because there's only so many protocols you can put in a little thin book. So I teach that as well. I teach it on my blog, so that what you're doing is you're learning the more simple conditions and how to treat them. So, another question here. Okay, if someone proves a remedy, should you go to the second line or just lessen how often you give it? Okay. If someone proves a remedy, should you go? No, not until you antidote it. You want to antidote that first. You want to stop the action. Now, there is also a way of looking at this, saying that the correct remedy is the best antidote, and I tend to agree with that. But just you're new at this, is my guess. I mean, if you've been seasoned for many decades, then it's a different story. Then I would say yes, just go on to the second level as a possibility. But if someone is suffering from approving, you might want to stop the action, get a little breather for a day or so or longer, and then start the second level. All righty. So I did have a train of thought that I was on there for a minute, and I think I've lost it. But you want to make sure that I was talking about the Banerjees. Results speak for themselves. And if you want to know how to treat this or that, and instead you're worried that if you use this protocol and you don't use classical method, which is just one medicine at a time, used one day or maybe 2 days with a split dose, or maybe tops 3 days in a row of one medicine, and then wait 6 to 8 weeks. If you don't want to use that method, and I urge you, unless you're really young and you've got a lot of time on your hands and you have a lot of money and you're willing to roll up your sleeves and study classical, I would urge you to use this method that I teach, because it's fast, it's reproducible, and the results are undeniable. And the reason I know that, and the reason that you should know that if you've been following me at all, is that the Banerjees have been doing this for 150 years collectively. They each see 100 patients per day. There are 12 of them, 12 senior doctors. That's 1,200 patients in one day. They do this 6 days a week. What is that? 7,200 patients per week for 150 years. I don't know any other homeopath in the world. If there is such a thing, please send them my way. I want to meet them. I want to go watch them. I want to observe their methods as well. But I don't think there's anything like that on this earth. I've never seen such lines lined up in front of that research center. And I used to have to muscle my way to get through the crowds to get up to the level of the floors where the doctors were. So I'm here to teach this. I'm here to explain it. I'm here to flesh out what the Banerjees don't have time to do. And that is my pleasure. And I plan to be doing this every Monday. And we're actually in the throes of talking about doing a few more Facebooks per week, because I find that there's a lot of interest in this, and I want to keep you folks going with it. Remember, what I teach, what we're using is a recipe. That's why at the end of my blog, we actually have, they're called remedy cards, kind of as a play on the words recipe card. They look like recipe cards. We're giving you the exact protocol, but it's up to you to make sure that you are treating the correct condition. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. I see all of you in here. It's wonderful to see you. God bless all of you. Bye now.